In the 16th century, England was ruled by the formidable King Henry VIII. It was a time of radical change and political upheaval. The kingdom stood at the edge of a religious revolution that would shatter the unity of Christendom forever. Henry was desperate for a male heir. To get one, he needed to end his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. When the Pope refused to grant an annulment, Henry decided to break away from the Roman Catholic Church. Amidst this storm was Sir Thomas More. A renowned lawyer and scholar, he was one of the brightest minds of his age. More rose to become the Lord Chancellor of England, the king's most trusted advisor and friend. But More was also a man of deep private faith. For him, the law of God always held higher authority than the law of kings. At the same time, John Fisher, the Bishop of Rochester, was recognized as one of the most learned men in Europe. Fisher was a dedicated scholar and the Chancellor of Cambridge University. He was a pillar of the English Church. When Henry began his quest for supremacy, Fisher was the only bishop who openly and consistently opposed him. Fisher became the chief defender of Queen Catherine's marriage, even stating he would die to protect its sanctity. The king's great matter soon evolved from a marriage dispute into a direct challenge to the Pope's authority. Henry married Anne Boleyn and declared himself the supreme head of the Church of England. The tension reached its breaking point. In 1534, the Act of Succession was passed. It required every subject to take an oath acknowledging the new marriage and the king's title. The subsequent Act of Supremacy made it high treason to deny the king's religious title. The trap was set for More and Fisher. Thomas More, seeing the direction of the king, resigned his chancellorship, hoping to live a quiet life in retirement. He retreated to his home in Chelsea, but his silence was seen as a loud and dangerous dissent by the king. In April 1534, More was summoned to Lambeth Palace to take the oath. He knew this moment was coming. More refused to take the oath. He would not explain why, relying on his legal right to remain silent. John Fisher likewise refused. For him, the issue was clear. No king could claim the authority that belonged only to the church. Both men were arrested and taken to the Tower of London. They would spend their final months within its cold stone walls. Conditions were harsh. Fisher, nearly 80 years old, suffered greatly from the cold and lack of food. More spent his time writing spiritual treatises and letters to his beloved daughter, Margaret, preparing for the end. Fisher remained resolute, even as his health failed. His spirit was unbroken by the king's pressure to recant. In an attempt to protect him, Pope Paul III created Fisher a cardinal, but this only sealed his fate. Henry was livid. He reportedly said that he would send Fisher's head to Rome for the hat instead. John Fisher was brought to trial first. He was convicted of treason for denying the king's supremacy over the church. The sentence was death. Fisher heard it with calm dignity, ready to meet his creator. On the morning of June 22, 1535, Fisher was woken and told it was his time. He dressed with care. He walked to the scaffold with a small New Testament in his hand, reading from the Gospel of John. Fisher told the crowd he died for the faith of the Holy Catholic Church. A moment later, his life was ended. 9 days later, Thomas More was brought to trial. He defended himself with brilliant legal precision. However, the perjury of Richard Rich, who claimed More had spoken treason in the Tower, secured his conviction. Once the verdict was read, More finally spoke his mind, declaring that no secular king could be head of the church. He was sentenced to be beheaded. He left the hall with a smile, telling his judges he hoped they would meet in heaven. On his way back to the Tower, he shared a final, emotional embrace with his daughter, Margaret. On July 6, 1535, the feast of St. Thomas Becket, More was led to Tower Hill. He was weak from his long imprisonment, but his wit remained. He joked with the lieutenant to help him up the scaffold. He told the onlookers he died the king's good servant, but God's first. He died with a prayer on his lips. The news of their deaths shocked Europe. The Emperor Charles V said he would rather have lost his best city than such a counselor. Over the centuries, More and Fisher became symbols of conscience and resistance against state tyranny. In 1935, 400 years after their deaths, they were canonized as saints by the Catholic Church. Their story remains a powerful reminder of the cost of integrity and the enduring power of faith. Thomas More and John Fisher, the saints who defied a king and won a place in eternity.